They told us luxury was an inheritance, passed down stitch by stitch, secret by secret. But somewhere between runway drama and quarterly profit calls, the golden thread frayed. Tonight we pull at that thread, quietly and precisely, to find out what really happened to craftsmanship, why the price tags keep rising even as the seams slip, and how you, the thoughtful buyer, can learn to tell the difference between true luxury and expertly marketed imitation. Follow us on Instagram at GTWJMag. Let's start with a small experiment you can try at home. Take an old piece you love, an heirloom coat, a bag from 10 years ago, a suit that still hangs like poetry, and compare it to something fresh from a boutique with a high price. Run your fingers along the seam, look inside the lining, feel the weight of the fabric. There is a language there, a quiet vocabulary of time, of patience, of hand and eye. That language has not disappeared, but it is being spoken less often and louder silences have taken its place. Luxury once meant a promise. The label was shorthand for exceptional materials, human labor, and a slow conversation between maker and wearer. That promise came from craft, hand-stitched hems, bespoke fittings, tanneries that knew leather as a temperamental friend, ateliers where apprentices learned for years before being trusted with a contour. Craftsmanship was not a marketing line. It was an ethic, an infrastructure. It required time, costs, and crucially scarcity. So where did things change? The answer is not one villain, it's a convergence. First, the economics of fashion evolved dramatically. Global supply chains and faster production cycles made it possible to produce more, cheaper, and faster. The industry learned to translate visual cues of luxury, polish, proportion, silhouette into mass manufacture. The result? Aesthetics divorced from their original material logic. A coat could look couture on a hanger, but crumble after a season because the interior architecture was never built to last. Second, the value equation shifted. Brands discovered that perception could be engineered. Photography, celebrity association, immaculate packaging, and storytelling all became instruments to transmute price into perceived prestige. If you build the right story, show the bag at the right dinner, have the right face hold it for a moment on camera, scarcity and desirability appear. The product becomes a signifier rather than a craft object. Third, consumer psychology changed. The hunger for immediacy, amplified by social media, created demand not for heirloom pieces, but for constant novelty. When desire is measured in posts rather than provenance, many brands optimize for virality rather than longevity. That is not merely commerce, it is culture. We began to value the image of ownership more than the slow, quiet satisfaction of something that grows more beautiful with time. But we must not moralize without nuance. There are several crucial truths that get lost in broad declarations that luxury is dead. First, craftsmanship still exists. It lives in small ateliers, in family-run workshops, in dyeing trades that still stitch couture linings and hand-edge leather with the same care as their grandparents. Second, not every high price is empty. Many brands still invest in raw materials, artisan training, and repair services. Finally, while supply chains can produce mediocre things quickly, they can also, when treated responsibly, scale quality in impressive ways. The problem is a mismatch between claim and delivery. When a label promises handmade but relies on mechanized finishing to meet holiday demand, disappointment follows. When a price increases dramatically but the structural features that justify that price, seam reinforcement, full-grain leather, true hand finishing, do not appear, trust is eroded. Trust, once lost, is slow to rebuild. We also need to talk about scale and its moral hazard. Luxury's exclusivity was partly created by constrained production, fewer pieces, careful control. But in a world where growth is rewarded, brands face pressure to expand, new stores, new markets, new product lines. Expansion often means outsourcing. When production moves from a single atelier to multiple contract factories, quality variability increases. The rigorous standards of a master craftsman are hard to codify in a checklist for an overseas supplier. Subtlety is hard to transmit at scale. There is another layer, the inflation of the luxury word itself. Marketing has democratized the language of legacy, heritage-inspired, craft-driven, atelier-made. These phrases are everywhere. Consumers see them and assume a promise. But authenticity requires proof. The story must be verifiable in the making. Proof is not just a press release, it is a visible workshop, a documented supply chain, repair and restoration services, and a consistent product life that outlives seasonal trends. Let us consider what true craftsmanship looks like today, because it is not antique nostalgia. It is a set of decisions, choosing a stable leather with time-tested tanning processes, investing in pattern making that respects how the body moves, reinforcing stress points with thoughtful stitch patterns, allowing for repair, offering service. Craftsmanship is also training, mentorship programs for young artisans, living wages in ateliers, and long-term relationships with suppliers. When a brand invests in these things, cost will follow, and rightly so. The price then reads as a contract. You pay not only for the object, but for the care behind it. So how can you as a buyer decode the difference between genuine craft and crafted messaging? Start with 3 habits. First, inspect the interior. A finished inside is a sign of integrity. Neat seams, bound edges, and a lining that tells you the piece was made to last. Second, research the brand's transparency. Does the label explain where components come from? Do they name their tanneries? Do they discuss stitch counts or finishing techniques? Third, measure service. Brands that offer repairs and refurbishing show they expect the product to age, and they build a relationship with the customer that outlives a single season. Let's also talk about vintage, why older pieces often feel superior. When labor and materials were cheaper relative to the brand's price structure, and before the acceleration of fashion cycles, many houses concentrated on making things that lasted. That is why a coat from decades ago can still look better and function better than a new, expensive counterpart. Vintage reminds us that quality is cumulative. It is the result of consistent values applied over time. Now, what about the defenders of modern luxury, those who argue that prices reflect branding costs, not just materials? They have a point. Building desirability requires investment in stores, in interfaces, in marketing. Yet branding should not be a license to dilute product. A brand that thrives on image but neglects the object is building a bubble. Bubbles burst when consumers become literate, when buyers demand repair, traceability, and meaningful differences. The market is waking up to that literacy. There's a hopeful, perhaps radical response here. The brands that will survive and thrive are the ones that treat luxury as a long conversation, not a quarterly metric. They will hybridize, maintain beautifully executed heritage pieces while offering accessible capsules that are honestly positioned as trend-driven, not heirloom. They will rebuild trust with transparency, repair services, and investments in the guilds that preserve craft skills. They will teach customers what to expect and then deliver it. And some of the smartest consumers will adapt their buying behavior. They will prioritize fewer, better things. They will learn to ask questions. What is the full cost of ownership? Is this piece repairable? Who made it? They will value longevity over novelty. In that shift, there is real power, a rebalancing that rewards authenticity. Finally, we must speak of responsibility beyond commerce. Luxury houses hold cultural influence. They shape labor markets, craft traditions, and the value placed on handiwork. When a house chooses to protect artisanal practices and to invest in real materials, it creates jobs that respect the hands that make things. When it chooses speed and optics over repair and resilience, it contributes to a culture of disposability that spans beyond fashion. The ethics of a stitch are, in the end, the ethics of how we live. So where do we land? Luxury craftsmanship is not dead. It is contested. It sits at the intersection of market pressures, cultural hunger, and human skill. The myth to dismantle is the belief that a high price alone equals care. The alternative is an informed, patient, and demanding consumer culture that rewards brands for actually keeping their promises. If you care about this conversation, begin simply. Buy less, ask more, and learn the language of making. Look for the signs of genuine craft. Support the houses and ateliers that invest in repair, transparency, and training. Celebrate pieces that show their history with dignity rather than disguise it. This isn't about shaming modern design or rejecting all newness. It is about insisting that when something is called luxury, it must bear the weight of that word, not as an Instagram caption, but as a thing made to last, to be loved, and to be passed forward. If this spoke to you, tell us what mattered most in your last luxury purchase. Follow at GTWJ Mag, join the conversation, and let's keep the standards high for our wardrobes and for the hands that make them.